Good morning, everybody. Everybody hear me all right? All right. So, my name is Joe Winchell. I'm from Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. Specifically, I work for AgOutcomes. So, you'll see two names there in the bottom right-hand corner, AgOutcomes and Reharvest Partners. Together, we manage the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. Myself at AgOutcomes, we are a subsidiary of Iowa Soybean Association. So I can dive in more detail if anybody wants to know on how Iowa Soybean was involved in bringing forth the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. So kind of see what's the deal with carbon. So who in here has kind of been listening or looked into or been paying attention to some of these carbon markets and opportunities for farmers and landowners? And yeah, well, it's confusing to say the least, I'd say. So kind of, here's soil carbon sequestration, everything on the right. That's what everybody's wanting to hear. That's what the media is all on. I think our consumers are on. And on the left is everything that we've been doing and continue to improve over time. Boosted productivity, we know we're raising more bushels on less acres every year. Reducing emissions, increasing efficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the limelight, the spotlight's on carbon. And so I'll kind of talk about how we brought carbon into, I think, more of a farmer-friendly opportunity that is driving more dollars per acre for you folks based on the environmental outcomes that are generated by these practices. So Soil and Water Outcomes Fund provides financial incentives to farmers who implement new conservation practices that passively sequester carbon, improve water quality, and other environmental outcomes. We then sell those environmental outcomes to private and public entities that have interest in it. So, water quality, meaning reductions in nitrogen and phosphorus in water, we sell mainly to city municipalities, City of Ames, City of Cedar Rapids, and then also IDOLS is purchasing pounds of reductions. And then carbon, all our carbon is actually sold to Cargill currently. So, before I get into our Ellison County, so kind of explain that. So you see a lot of other programs, maybe like Indigo, Nori, which Nori is like a carbon marketplace. Think of Nori as like a carbon Craigslist. But to go through to enroll in Nori's program, you go through avenues like Granular, Locus Ag. There was an article in Successful Farming and also Wall Street Journal a few months back. Kelly Garrett, farms over by Denison. He went through Locus Ag, which is a biological company out of Indiana, I believe. They go through the Nori marketplace. And so those are some of the other carbon-only programs that are out there. So what this all started with is Iowa Soybean wanted to figure out, is there a better way to promote conservation, increase environmental outcomes, but more in a market-driven fashion rather than traditional cost share through NRCS or other programs? And so we got down the path and saying, all right, we know we generate reductions of pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus from going to the water system. What's that worth and who is it worth anything to? City municipalities, IDOL, USDA, et cetera. And then what are the practices that we can implement that help reduce pounds of loss, or help increase pounds of loss, reduce pounds going into the water system? Well, we know it's the same practices that they've been asking for. It's reduced tillage, it's cover crops. Well, then the light bulb went on. That's the same two practices that carbon programs are asking for, because that's the same practices that sequester more carbon in the soil. When you till, think of tillage like when we till that soil, we open it up, we're releasing any carbon that we sequestered into the soil. When we have a cover crop, we have another crop that's continuing to grow, that's pulling more atmospheric carbon out, and we're sequestering in the soil. And so, to a farmer, to you guys, if you're out here doing the same practice, it doesn't matter if I'm getting paid for one of those outcomes or, both of them. So that's where we have been able to stack the two by finding customers that are willing to pay for them, bring it all together in one process, one enrollment process and everything, and offer a much higher financial opportunity, so price per acre, than what a carbon-only program would. So we have these eligible counties. So everything we enroll is essentially pre-sold. We have commitments from companies that said, you know, this is what we're willing to spend on carbon. This is what we're willing to spend this year on phosphorus and nitrogen. And so we can take that, know what our general outcomes, pounds of phosphorus and nitrogen, tons of carbon per acre, and take the market price and kind of drive that down and know how many acres we need. And then, so eligible counties flow because City of Ames, you can see there, City of Cedar Rapids, and then Idalls for the rest of it, you know, more down here in southeast Iowa. When those city municipalities are paying for pounds of reductions, they want that kind of be local. They don't want to be saying, City of Ames is buying reductions that happens down in Mills or County or somewhere down there, right? They want it to be more local because it's going towards their nutrient reduction goals and mandates as well. So that's the first part of becoming eligible. First thing is your field in an eligible county. Next thing would be, I ask folks all the time, what are your current practices? You know, what's your current tillage? Are you cover cropping? Have you tried it? You know, all that. A lot of folks I talk to, you know, as we move kind of south of 80, especially I live over in Madison County, so it's a lot of the same, you know, we're a lot of no-till, reduced tillage maybe we're VTing, maybe we started strip tilling, whatever that may be. We've tried some cover crops, or I'm doing my acre max where I'm capped out with NRCS at 160 acres. But, you know, if there's dollars available, yeah, I'd be open to trying some more. I'm just not doing it out of my own pocket. And so that's an opportunity to say, guys, farm 1,000 acres and you're doing 160. You know, this is where, all right, you got another 840 acres maybe that, you know, we could look at, can we implement this on more of your acres? Because we've already, we have Idalls as a buyer, we can't double up this with the cost share program, like with NRCS or anybody. I'll tell you that the enrollment process with us is much easier than going to your local NRCS office. Nothing against those folks at all. I think they're doing everything they can, but for me, anytime maybe you're dealing with the government, things can be a little tougher, you know, a little tighter and more stringent. When we do it, so we'll start to check all those boxes. When you want to enroll, see on the back of that trifold pamphlet, there's a website. You go on that website, there's a big green Enroll Now button. You click that, you know, to create a username, password, any of your farm information, you know, so create your farming entity. And then for a field, we ask for baseline data and then future data. So how we actually generate or know what the outcomes are that we're paying you for are, we run the two models, NTT, Nutrient Tracking Tool, and then Comet Farm model, which is Comet Farm generates the tons of carbon that would be sequestered. Same one, Nori and Indigo are using, both are USDA supported models that they use as well. And so we actually run the models for what you were currently doing for that field. So we take into account soil type, slope, fertilizer, manure, tillage passes, etc. that are done. Generate how many tons of carbon are sequestered or emitted based on those practices and that field for current practices, and then how many pounds of nitrogen phosphorus that we're potentially losing based on those current practices and field. And then we do the same thing with newly proposed practices. Say I'm VTing the head of my corn and I'm no-tilling my soybeans. You know, this is my fertilizer program. Everything's going to stay the same, except I'm going to start seeding the cover crop in that rotation. So we can model that, and based on the differences of the additional practices, we can figure out what the net change is and those outcomes are. And then we can pay on that net change. So say we're going from emitting 0.3 tons of carbon an acre per year, and we go to sequestering half a ton, we can pay for 0.8 tons of carbon per year. Think of it that way. Say we're emitting, I think usually in Iowa we're emitting on average, we're losing about 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre through volatilization and leaching. And say we can reduce that by 10% or so. Maybe more than that, I'd say 10 pounds. So we can go from 40 pounds of loss to 30 pounds of loss. Then we can pay for that 10 pounds of loss to the farmer. Another part, a lot of other programs, carbon-only programs. Yes, sir.
So what if the farmer's already doing all these practices?
So if farmers are already doing these practices, odds are they're probably, maybe they are in a NRCS contract, 3-year contract with them and started doing them.
No, I do them because it's better for soil health.
Yeah, so Practical Farmers of Iowa offers some payments. Cargill ADM has some premiums. There's opportunities for current practices to get up to, heck, I've talked to some guys getting 45, 50 bucks an acre based on what they're currently doing through a couple different avenues. So I get that question all the time. So, I mean, no question's going to offend me, folks.
So go till everything, go do everything, we'll go plow and then enroll.
Yeah, I haven't met a guy who's willing to invest 3, 4, 5 years. We know this is a long-term agronomic benefit in this stuff. I'm not going to go undo what I've just done the last 3, 5 years for 30 bucks an acre, because the agronomic benefits are going to be worth better than, 30 bucks at $5, $5.80 was the other, I think, board the other. I mean, there's more. We have more bushels we can make than 40 bucks an acre. Also, that's what not paying for verification costs. Some other carbon-only programs, depending on what they are, you have to pay for some verification costs. So any program through NORI, like I said, think of NORI as your carbon marketplace or carbon Craigslist. They'll run the models to tell you how many carbon credits you have. You'll put those credits on the market, per se. You'll be contacted by someone who wants to buy them. Once that negotiation, once that contract, or once that price is agreed upon, then you'll have to pay some verification costs. I said, guys, we got to make this simple when we're doing this, so we just take that all in-house and we take it on and say, all right, you're willing to do these practices, this is what the outcomes be generated, this is what the payment would be, then we decide, is that something we want to pursue? So, we go through the process, enter your data, submit the application, we run the models, figure out what the proposed payment would be, and then send that back. Send that back to you. At that point, you're still not obligated, committed to anything. You can see, all right, this came back at 30 bucks an acre, 35 bucks an acre. Decide whether that's, worth it to you or not. Decide it is, then you agree to the contract. I write up the NRCS paperwork and go through all of just HEL, highly erodible compliant, wetland compliant, that kind of stuff. Go through the environmental check, and then you'd receive 50% of that payment up front. We go throughout the year, and then you receive the other 50% of that payment on the backside. We understand there's some costs associated with cover crop seed, etc., so that's why we offer some of that payment up front. It's a 1-year contract with the option to keep re-enrolling, so that's another difference. Indigo is a 5-year contract. NORI is a 10-year contract. 10?
Indigo's a 10.
So they're advertising 5, but yeah.
Talk to them when you can.
True Terra just recently came out with True Carbon. That's a 20-year contract. Honestly, it's the risk on our shoulders to offer a 1-year contract because to do this, we know carbon sequestration and all these things are long-term things. It's 5 to 10 years where we really start ramping up carbon sequestration, but I just don't like long-term contracts myself. So we agreed, we offer a 1-year contract with the option to say a year after that contract, you liked everything, I want to re-enroll, I want to keep getting paid for all this stuff, great, re-enroll. Honestly, that's what we want to. If we would look at doing a multi-year contract, it probably wouldn't be over, say, 3 years. So that would be, but right now, like I said, we're a 1-year contract.
So how long can you get paid for this stuff?
Keep going, 10, 20, as long as you want. Like I mentioned, you'll receive 50% of that payment up front. Yes, sir.
Well, do you foresee the cost of like you said, industries turn around and buy these credits and they can offset the tax they're going to be paying part of their penalty. Do you foresee that that's going to be higher as we move towards
I hope so.
those initiatives?
I hope so.
I talked to the Indigo guy quite a bit this last fall, and they may have had a
It's because they know, like a lot of the agronomic benefits after we adopt,
Yeah.
no-till, I mean, it takes a while to start building all that up.
But it was a pittance. I mean, it was nothing.
Yeah.
It had to be in 10 years, and
It could have been $2 the first year.
If I could net $10 an acre a year, he said, oh, he always told me it was gonna end up being around $1 an acre to commit for 10 years. And I said, why would I commit to something for 10 years? It's not gonna pay me the time it takes to fill the papers out.
Right. Yeah. We can get on, we can do an hour-long conversation about, the price of carbon, why it's the price that it is, what's gonna drive it higher. You look at the price of carbon in Canada, they're $40 a ton. I'll get through this, and if we have time, we can dive into that one. So this is just a brief of some screenshots I've taken. That is a ISA board member, field there, Southeast Iowa, they enrolled. Picked up this farm this spring. So went back 2020, no-till soybeans. So we want to capture any tillage, fertilizer, planting, harvest. Crop year is harvest to harvest. Anything that happens post-harvest goes with the next cropping season. So we captured 2020's no-till beans. He's putting his fertilizer 2-year spread ahead of his corn. So literally all it is for soybean is no-till, planting, and harvest. Coming into the corn program, he's strip tilling, so he got his fertilizer, he's putting ammonia and dry on the strip till there in April 1st. Put some starter on with his planter the 20th. Side dressing there in July, and then coming back and harvesting. So he's not changing any tillage, nothing. He's just going to add a cover crop to it. So here in the fall of 21, he's going to go back to soybeans, no till, no fertilizer ahead of soybeans, but just add a rye crop ahead of the soybeans. And then 23, again, the plan, we understand the stuff's in the future. Do we know what date we're going to plant? No. But we know, hey, it's going to probably hopefully be, third week of April or so. So the plan is just we simply hit the copy button, we copied 21 to 23, and then added the cover crop again. This was in the mid to up to $30 an acre. Things that affect prices, soil type, so carbon's worth like 8, 10, $12 an acre. I don't see a carbon-only program sustaining itself much longer, maybe over the next 5 years, just because I myself don't talk to many farmers that are willing to add change for 8, 10, $12 an acre. I think you probably got to be minimum $15 an acre to do anything, and it's still costing you more dollars than that to do it. It all depends, do you have livestock that you can graze it? Are you going to chop it or bale it ahead of your beans? Every operation is different. So the water quality piece is really driving a lot of why you see the differences, because we're stacking that water quality reduction price on top of that. And so the big thing is, slope, soil type, pounds of nutrients, fertilizer. I run scenarios where we have a fertilizer program, we apply manure. Are we going to reduce our fertilizer, rates at all for the manure we apply? Are we giving that credit? Just kind of things that play into it. The models are actually very detail oriented, which is great. The more detail we can input and the more we can understand, the better, more upside there is, but also kind of double-edged sword, the more downside there is too. So there's my contact information. I know that was pretty quick, but I think we probably get more value of answering questions, and I hope, more questions can spur more questions. So what questions do you have? Because I know that was probably too quick. Yes, sir.
So that picture you showed, the guy was planting green, is there any requirements as far as how long the crop has to grow, the cover crop, to achieve certain
No.
level you're
No.
talking about?
I basically ask for best intentions. I often see, I know you can go out and you can aerial apply a rye crop or something prior to harvest. And yeah, you look at, hey, it's going to be out there another month and a half sooner. But versus drilling, or a lot of folks are putting box or something on their DT bar, however they're gonna seed that cover crop. You know, I like drilling or something like that right after post harvest, you know, same day, next day, whatever, because we're getting more pounds per acre that we can't fly on. We're getting better seed soil contact. It's gonna germinate better. It's just gonna be a better emergence. So I asked with best intentions. So no, it doesn't have to go till May 1st or anything like that. I mean, he still kept his planting date the same as, you know, April 20th.
About roll with restricted,
What's that?
roll with,
On your cover crops?
yeah,
No, but I probably wouldn't go over 30s at 15.
no, 15.
Oh, yeah. You know, if you can maybe fit your bean drill to set up, you know, or something like that, great.
I see it says drainage on there. You ever take the pattern top? Or terraces or water? lines or
No,
something like that?
so, the NTT, nutrient tracking tool, what tracks water quality or models water quality, it takes into account tile. And then we actually soil sample 10% of our fields per year, and then water sample 10% of adequate sites. So those drainage questions, does drainage exist in this field? Yeah. Is it rain over pattern? What's the depth of our tile? Say 4 foot. Is there surface intakes? Is there an accessible drainage outlet we can collect a sample from? And does that field only drain that field, or are there other fields tied in? Two things, like I said, NTT takes that into account. So more intensive tile is better agronomically, and I'm a proponent of it. I think it's great. But tile also is, you know, a kind of an interstate for, you know, our water and nutrient, everything moving out. So it somewhat does kind of play into factor, but it's more towards finding and deciding what fields are better water sampling sites for us.
Can you get paid for bioreactors yet? Like if you got the in and the out, how much you're taking out?
Not yet. We're trying to figure out what how to financially just pay for it. Is that, you know, what's it worth? How do we just make it financially work? Also, I mean, to the bigger extent, bioreactors, or even, you know, do we take land and is it, we're going to take 20 acres and put it in a wetland or something? How do we compete with federal programs for that? Yes, sir.
Sure enrollment deadline.
So we're looking for 80,000 acres in Iowa. We did 10,000 acres in Iowa last year. Basically, when we hit 80,000 acres, we're currently at about 28,000. So, I mean, we'll run we'll run till either we hit our acre goal or probably July 1st. But I know, guys, once we get busy planting and spraying and doing everything, we're not going to take the time to sit down and do this.
How long does it take to do field work?
Depends on how many fields you do. Takes the same amount of time to do 15 acres as it does 150 because it's field by field. Usually, folks sit down to their first field, it might take 10, 20 minutes. After that, because there's a copy function where I can copy that whole year's worth. So if I got 500 acres I want to enroll, and I have a soybean rotation, and it's the same management practice, whether it's, you know, on every field, corn and soybeans, you can start mapping and copying pretty quick. So the first field takes 20 minutes. After that, I mean, you can do 1,000 acres in an hour. Yes, sir.
What if it's a new field to you? Can you get paid for practices you're going to do?
Yes. So that's what this scenario is. Because he is doing all strip till and no till and cover crop. Well, he picked up these 2 fields. So these 2 fields will be new to him. And I don't expect somebody to go to the, you know, former tenant or the landlord and try to find past practices. It's best to your knowledge, and if you flat out just don't know, you know, we put no change, just so there's not a positive or negative effect in the models when we're comparing past to future.
What if you got a field that you, like field call, make half of it, and half of it you know to, but you count that whole thing as
I just map half the field. I had someone that they cover crop half the perimeter of their acres, and they had it on their drill, and they said it was 10 acres out of 80. He said, I don't care if you map whatever, just map 70 acres of the field. I mean, we try to make it so this is, you know, kind of built by farmers for farmers. You can graze. Grazing is absolutely not a problem. I'm trying to think. You can, you know, if you want to bale crop, you can do that. Hay acres, anybody seed down any new hay acres this spring? Those qualify? Because think of hay, you know, typically when you go from corn soy rotation, you're gonna apply, in a 2-year rotation, you're gonna apply a lot less fertilizer to a hay field. It's gonna be a constant perennial cover, and it's gonna be no-till. So that kind of fires on all cylinders. Does anybody enroll, like, sir, you mentioned you were talking to Indigo. Is anybody in a carbon program? Or started down that path? Why not? I guess.
Well, mostly for me, it was they weren't gonna offer me anything to entice me to it. I'm still gonna do the practice,
Sure.
but I'm not gonna, like I told them, I won't commit to such a small amount of money because one of two things is happening. Either the industry's not paying enough for the carbon credit, or you guys are keeping one hell of a lot of money.
Yeah. So what drives our geography, what drives our price is, right now what drives our geography is finding more people willing to pay for water quality. That's the tough part. A lot of companies want to buy carbon. I wish a lot more companies would add, companies are saying, in their PR, called New Belgium Brewery, it makes Fat Tire beer. They're buying carbon from Indigo, saying, oh, it's part of our sustainability plan. We market that our beer is, we have a sustainability plan where we're improving air quality. Well, whether it's a municipality or Gulf and Exxon or whoever it is, I just wish, Patagonia would come forward and say, put money where your mouth is and say we're going to put $500,000 a year towards improving water quality. And I think farmers are willing to do something, but we got to work together. I live on the Raccoon River, so anybody follow the Des Moines water lawsuit? I mean, I live and breathe. I fully understand what it's like to. I wasn't, being sued obviously, but to go through, someone, municipality will sue farmers up the stream. So. And that's why Cedar Rapids and Ames are willing to say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's work together. I'll incentivize you because the less that's coming into my municipality plan, the less I have to take action. Yes, sir.
So if hay seeding is eligible, is pasture eligible?
Are you seeding new pasture? That's where it gets it.
You gotta seed it.
Yeah, gotta be, we see that transition of moving, in that case, maybe it's coming out of a corn soy rotation or whatever, and then we're gonna buy it.
So basically, anybody that's doing a lot of this practice already is kind of out of luck.
Yeah. How many acres do you think in Iowa are cover crop? It's 1 million acres. That's 4% of our acres in Iowa. We got 96% of the acres in Iowa that qualify. Now I understand that's great, but that's not your farm. I get it. We got a lot of improvement. Operationally, that's where this is tough. Is cover crops and no-till the best fit on every acre? Probably not. And so I work with some folks up on the Des Moines Lobe where for them, they're able to get it to work. But that doesn't mean it works for the neighbor across the fence. They're not set up operationally to do that. I can give a talk like this, but honestly, I just come back around and I sit down with farmers every day and just kind of talk through how can this work on, part of your operation or not. I mean, it's just, we understand I'm not going to try to fit a square peg in a hole, but, if it's an opportunity for a field or two or a lodge or whatever it may be, then, might as well be taking advantage of it. Yes, sir.
So if you're seeding down hay ground, do you have an example of kind of how much that's worth? If it's been in a corn bean rotation?
yeah, I can just say it'd be worth, we cap at $40 an acre. It's gonna be at the top end of that range. And with a yearly contract, you can, say we're expecting to get 5 years out of our hay stand. We can just re-enroll that until, say, all right, the hay's, alfalfa's getting thin, I'm gonna pull it out, rotate it out a couple of years, and we can seed it back down and roll it back in.
There's
Yeah.
a dollar cap, is there an acre cap?
No,
Is there an acre minimum?
no.
So the other side, you said, people are asking about, carbon and paying for carbon more
Yes.
so than the water quality. Is
Right.
there anything that you're doing to incentivize or advertise or try to get that back, right? Try to make the, because it would benefit you if more people were doing soil water quality, paying for that.
My boss and the gentleman that runs Reharvest Partners, I watch my boss's schedule. He's probably on a conference call 2 times a day with some company trying to, essentially pitching them what we're doing. And trying to show them that there's value in what we're doing and there's value in, your company willing to invest, work with us. Yeah. I thought, surely companies would want to pay to improve water quality. Like, who's the most influential person in the ag supply chain? It's the consumer. And if consumers willing to pay how much more premium when they see an organic label? Well, we don't have to maybe associate, that box of cornflakes was grown quote sustainably, but that company could say, we're promoting water quality, or we're paying to improve water quality. I would say the majority of the folks going in the grocery store and buying groceries are willing to support that brand over one that isn't. But it's just, when when you might ask for a couple $100,000, well, they want to be pretty sure that it's going to be a good investment. Because no company's just going to give money away. So, other examples, we're working with a pilot in Illinois. Pepsi and Ingredion makes a corn syrup, goes in Pepsi. And Nutrient as well. And Ohio, we're doing the same thing. Looking at doing a pilot in Kansas because the largest recreational reservoir in Kansas saw their first algae bloom. Partnering with the Kansas Department of Water, essentially, and that city municipality, and they're willing to say, all right, what can we do to partner with farmers upstream to say, we know we have to apply nitrogen and phosphorus, we have to grow a crop, we have to feed people, we have to feed cattle, especially in Kansas. But, it costs us to scrub pounds out of our water, but what can we do? Can we reallocate those dollars back upstream and just kind of prevent it from coming in instead of just constantly trying to take it out of the water and then push it downstream? Who would be interested in, I got business cards or something, if anybody's willing to, you have some one-off conversations and, have a question on how it might fit one of your fields, please get a hold of me. Again, there's my contact info. So.
Hey Joe, one question I had. There are some counties like on the very southern tier, kind of along with Mississippi there, that I know we have some guys.
Yeah.
Are there any business talk opening those up, or, is that just
Yeah.
based off?
Well, that's based on the water.
Right.
Last year we were watershed only. I said, guys, we got these county lines. I live in the watershed and I don't even know where the line is. and almost every program like this is concentrated in a watershed. So I'm like, we got to get this stuff outside. What would be awesome if we could get something on the Mississippi, somebody willing to say, hey, all this water goes to the Mississippi. All the Mississippi goes to the Gulf. Can we get somebody to step forward and willing to work with us? And once we start getting those, I think that's when other companies feel the pressure of saying, all right, my competition's doing it. We got to start doing something. Any other questions? I know I'm keeping you from lunch, so. But like I said, you know, folks, don't hesitate to call. Like I said, I'm there up there in Ankeny, office by travel, use every day. Be happy to have a conversation, you know, whether it's a fit or not, it's never a waste of time.